This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I'm sitting here over a couple of lovely pints of Bowes Lug Tread Ale from Ottawa with none other than Chris Benziger. How are you today, Chris?
I'm fantastic, Jamie. How are you?
I'm great. We've just had a lovely lunch tasting some of Chris's wines. Now, what brings you to Toronto today?
Well, I'm here for the wonderful Earth Day celebrations that Lifford is putting on for us today. So I'm here for a day in Toronto and a day in Ottawa tomorrow.
Oh, fantastic. Now, tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to the wine community. How you got into wine. I know that this is something to do with your family, but all those lovely things that perhaps our viewers don't know.
I guess I'm a card-carrying member of the Lucky Sperm Club.
The Lucky Sperm Club?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was born into a wine family. My father had a distributorship back in New York. And my oldest brother, I come from a large family. It was nepotism run amok, 5 brothers, 2 sisters. Actually, there's 21 of us now, card-carrying Benzigers making wine in California. We started about 30 years ago. We moved from New York City, from owning a distributor side of the business. My older brother moved out to California and got bitten by that California wine bug and convinced my dad to sell his entire operation in New York, sell the house, and we all moved out. Remember that old TV series, Green Acres?
Yes.
Well, we were Green Acres. We moved from New York to the beautiful bucolic hillsides of Glen Ellen, California, and set up shop. And
where is Glen Ellen exactly?
Glen Ellen is about an hour north, nothing like the ring of empty kegs, huh?
Yeah.
Glen Ellen is an hour north of San Francisco. It's slightly north of the town of Sonoma in what we call the heart of the valley. It's a beautiful, beautiful area. And we're located on the top of Sonoma Mountain. Well, not on the top, but on the flanks of Sonoma Mountain. It's an old volcano. If you cup your hands, it's exactly what the topography of the property looks like. This gorgeous hanging valley. It's just a little shy of 100 acres that we farm up there, and we've been doing that for 30 years. We farm mostly Bordeaux varieties there. Our wine that we're most proud of is a wine called Tribute.
Now, when people hear the name Benziger, most people actually think of the other B word, the biodynamic word. Now, give me a little bit of an insight into
how we became biodynamic.
Exactly.
Well, it's a pretty interesting story, and I'm sure it's a story that a lot of wineries find themselves in. Basically, we were doing things wrong. I mean, let's cut to the chase. We were very conventional farmers, and we were farming in a way that was putting scars in the land that we couldn't heal. In the late 80s, we had erosion issues, we had phylloxera not once but twice, and the overall quality of our wines was diminishing. And it was something we couldn't put our finger on what was happening out there. And so we tried dabbling in integrated pest management, some erosion control issues, but they didn't seem to work. They seemed kind of a patchwork fix to something that we didn't really know what it was. And we stumbled upon biodynamics, and with the help of a consultant by the name of Alan York and my brother's passionate kind of curiosity into it, in 1994 we started to farm biodynamically. In 1996 we went cold turkey and dove into the principle of biodynamics, which really are kind of an estate farming concept where we use biodiversity. We use a closed system, meaning that we recycle everything. We follow the natural rhythms of nature, both solar and lunar. We use our biodynamic preparations, and we try to influence not just the vineyard, but the entire piece of property as one entity. And in a word, what biodynamics truly is a holistic method of farming. It's different than organic farming because organic farming really celebrates the elimination of chemical inputs with the replacement of organic inputs, which is okay. It's certainly better than the latter, conventional farming. But what biodynamics is not only replacing the chemicals, but really healing the land and healing it with how nature intended to, and that's through biodiversity.
Now, when you're saying you went cold turkey, you're meaning you cut off that reliance upon chemical fertilizers,
right? And we didn't do it. We didn't kind of do it piecemeal. We said, let's do it, and it was tough. I'm not going to lie to you. 1997 was a horrible year for us. It was a great vintage, but our property was weak. The immune system hadn't rebuilt itself yet.
And so, what did that mean? Lower crops, like
lower yields, lower quality, and a severe amount of raisening because our grape, the roots weren't deep enough.
Right.
And it was a warm year, so we suffered raisening in 1997. 1998 was a very wet year, so we had mold and mildew issues that we couldn't control because we couldn't use typical fungicides and mildicides out there.
Now, for many wine growers, is it not seen as being to go biodynamic suddenly like that would cripple you financially unless you actually had that money behind you?
Well, yes and no. We decided to use just our home ranch first. We had other pieces of property that at that point we were being a little bit more conservative with our change out. We were going into organics instead of biodynamics. We were going into sustainability instead of organics, depending on how that piece of property was farmed. But on our ranch, we wanted to see if we could do it. And so we dove right in. But you're absolutely right. If you had one piece of property, it could be disastrous if you didn't do it just right. And what happened to us was right on the cusp when we were getting a little bit worried, is this going to work for us? We actually went over to Europe and really went to the foot of the masters, Chapoutier and Nicolas Joly and some of the great biodynamic houses in Europe. And that kind of gave us just enough wherewithal to kind of push ourselves through into 2000, where we were certified biodynamic. And I tell you what, it was the most magnificent transformation we could have done as a winery. And I'll just kind of tell it in a story on how much of a difference. When I was a kid, I'd walk out on our vineyards, and the dirt was as hard as this table. The soil was actually crunchy underfoot.
Just packed and
It was dead. It was dead. And when I was in the vineyard, the only thing that was green was the green canopy. And the only sound you heard in the vineyard was my own breathing and the wind. There was no sound of nature.
So no life in the vineyard.
No life. We killed it all, right? The only thing that we were keeping alive, and it was on life support, it was on a drip system with fertilizers, was our grapevines. And it made mediocre wine. Then you fast forward to the present, and you walk out in that same vineyard. First of all, you're walking out there and the grass is almost stomach high. In some areas, in other areas it's trimmed down low from our sheep. You walk out there and the soil is cakey, it's soft, like sponge, and it kind of, there's no compactability, it comes back. It has kind of a resilience to it. And then you sit down in the vineyard and there's, from our cover crop, there's a variety of flowers and legumes and grasses, clover and fescue out there. And then there's this cacophony, a symphony of insects and animal noises, the birds above, the insects below, and then the livestock in between flowing out there. You can hear the sheep and the cattle, you can hear the chickens. The place is a farm, a working farm, and it's alive. And that's the biggest thing about that piece of property now as opposed to two decades ago, is it went from being a dead property on life support to being a live, thriving, living piece of property. And the end game for us as a winery is authenticity. And that's really what biodynamic is. It's a magnet, if you will, and not a magnet, but a magnifying glasses. It amplifies what you have in your vineyard. And if we did our homework right, and I think we did, we planted the right grapes in the right spot, and it's going to amplify that into a truly unique wine. Now, it could also do the reverse. If you put the wrong grapes in the wrong spot, it could probably do the same and make a not-so-decent bottle of wine.
Now, was it a long, painful process to get where you are today? Because in tasting your wine today, the Tribute, I was actually, I think of all the biodynamic wines that I have tasted, I think it was probably one of the more polished, and it just appeared to be sitting perfectly in the glass. Many biodynamic wines that I've tasted have had issues with all manner of things. Where you want to go
it can be a little rough around the edges,
volatile acidity.
And particularly if you don't use sulfites, you can really kind of step off the deep end. But first of all, thank you very much. It's nice to say it. But I agree with you, and we're probably one of the oldest biodynamic farms in Northern California, wineries in Northern California. We were the first in Sonoma and Napa, one of the original players. So we've got a few vintages under our belt that helps us, because it is like unleashing wild horses. As Jansen Robinson said, the difference between regular wines and biodynamic wines is the difference between a lap dog and a hunting dog.
Right.
A wonderful saying, and what she means by that is you're releasing the hounds, you're releasing all that nature's energy in those wines, and if you don't know how to tame it, it can be a little overpowering in many of ways, as you just so suggested.
I mean, you mentioned Joly there, and one of the criticisms of his wines. I mean, some of those are pretty wild.
They are definitely wild. They're an acquired taste.
They most certainly are.
Yeah.
I happen to be very fond of them.
Yeah.
But
you probably would be in the minority, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've purchased them for an establishment I was working for previously, and it took me a little while. So
I love his wines too, but I've heard that critique at all. But what it is beautiful, authentic wines, and those need to be celebrated. And you're right. There's some wineries that kind of do go off the deep end, but on the other end, there's wineries that have truly stepped on that electrical rail of flavor, and something that you can't get from anything else. And I think that's probably one of the most overpowering things about biodynamic wines is they're true.
Now, who else do you feel is really doing it in California?
I think Paul Dolan is doing a great job.
Up in Mendocino?
Right, up in Mendocino. I think Evo over at Gurgich Hills has devoted all his energies into farming biodynamic. He has the largest biodynamic vineyard, I think, in California.
Really?
It's 420 acres right in Napa Valley. And Gurgich has been a well-established California winery, so that's a hell of a roll of the dice there. So my hat's off to him. Rajo, Robert Sinsky, Frog Sleep. I don't know if they're biodynamics, but they're certainly fantastic organic players.
And have been for quite some time.
Exactly. He's been one of the original guys out there. Many wineries are, and some of the best wines in California are made this way. They don't always tell you. And I think that's truly one of the greatest things. At least that's how we're doing it now. We didn't do this at the beginning, and I'm a little sorry we didn't. We want biodynamics to be a discovery. We want you to like the wine first. Not to say, oh, I want it because it's biodynamic. We want you to say, man, this wine is really good. And oh, by the way, why is it so good?
So why did you choose to go for the Demeter certification?
Because
or Demeter, as you say.
It's probably a little bit of that personality of my family is we wanted to just prove to ourselves that we could do it. And it's also, to be honest, with our workers too, it's an incentive.
I see.
If we can get certified, it's an award system, so we push for that, and it's a certification process that happens every single year. I was telling you at lunch I have to call Susan up at BD North America to finish off our certification today. It's something that happens every year, and it keeps us on our toes. It keeps us real, where other certifications aren't quite as investigative.
I think I know the word that you mean.
Yeah, I think Zoolander tried to say it too.
Yes.
Anyway, it's a great organization, and we're very proud to be a part of it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for spending some time with us today.
Jamie, what a pleasure.
And lovely to catch up with you again, and hopefully see you in California.
Yeah, I hope so, and I love being in Toronto. Thank you.
Take care.